Julia, thank you so much for being with us, and say hi to the class. Welcome, class. This is Julia Ewert. She is the absolute legend in sales. Her newly published book is sitting on the shelf behind her. She's going to point to it right now. There it is. I will speak in the class some more, so I don't need to say too much. But first, Julia, perhaps you could make yourself known to us in the room. Tell us anything you like about yourself.
Thanks, Paul. Hey, it's nice to meet with you or see you virtually through this session, everybody. Some of you have already connected with me on LinkedIn. If those of you here today have not already done that, please do that. You will find me. I am Julia Ewert, MBA. And what that will do is that will give you more of a flavour of how you can use these persuasion and influence skills every day in a really genuine way. So please connect with me on LinkedIn. If you haven't already, do that, please. Also, send me a message. I get a lot of connection requests. Send me a message, tell me that you come from Paul's class. So then it gives me context for where people are coming from. But essentially, as Paul knows, I'm a sales strategist and professional negotiator. In my former life, as what I refer to as a corporate slave, I worked with some of the biggest companies in the world, leading large sales teams. And so what I do now is I run my own company. There's 6 of us in my company. We teach a repeatable sales process to service-based organizations to help them convert more qualified contracts, increase their margins, and win more negotiations. So this process that I teach is called the Infinite Sales System. And it's based on world's best practice, given the experience that I've got for a couple of decades. But the cool, interesting part, which I know why I've really been asked here today, is because I'm also a professional negotiator. So I have learnt and I continue to learn negotiation skills from hostage, crisis, and terrorist negotiators. It is as interesting as what people think it might be, and the stories are very cool. But that aside is why it's relevant. When I've learned from some of these negotiators who are current or former FBI agents, who are genuinely doing life-saving work, the FBI negotiators, when they're working on these big, dangerous world-scale events, they can achieve peaceful resolution in 95% of instances.
Wow.
Now, that's like remarkably high, right? Now, in their sales world where I'm from, that's a pretty good conversion ratio, but they're winning most of their deals effectively, right? If you put it in that sort of language. And because I know some of these people, I get to ask them, how do you do it? And what I have learned, and again, what I continue to learn, is the same skills and techniques that FBI negotiators are using in those really dangerous scenarios are these same skills and techniques that we can use in our own companies to help improve how we influence and persuade.
Thank you, Julia. Perfect. And one thing to let you know, many people in the class have done another unit on the University of Sydney MBA, which is called Business Decision Making and Negotiation. And it's been interesting because throughout the course, we've been contrasting their experience in that course with what we're talking about here in influencing. And I know that course is very specifically in the business realm called How Do You Get the Outcome You Need for Your Business? And we've had some interesting examples shared. They do in the class, they do live negotiations where everyone's watching and it's like ready, steady, go, and then they get marks in the negotiation. And that's not what we're doing here. But I would be interested in your thoughts on the distinction or the difference between, let's say, negotiation and what you might call influence to cause an outcome or to cause a sale. I can hear the foundations that are very similar. What would you say is the difference?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that question with 2 answers. I'm going to tackle the difference between selling and negotiating. And I'm also going to tackle the difference between influencing and manipulating, because this comes up as a theme a lot with the clients that I work with. Let me go with the selling versus negotiating first. Simply by definition, selling is just an exchange of goods or services for some kind of currency, right? Selling is the oldest profession in the world, swapping something for something or paying something for something. Selling is much more transactional, and it's generally about the thing. What is it? What do I get? Where do I get it? Who does it for me? Is it blue? Is it purple? Is it $800 or is it $80,000? Do I get it next week or next month? It's about the stuff and the things, very technical language there. And selling is very one-sided. So if selling is very transactional, on the other hand, we have negotiating, which is actually quite tactical, right? By definition, negotiating is simply a discussion aimed at reaching agreement. Now, also, to bust some myths here, negotiating is just a fancy word for persuasion and influence. But it sounds better when we say negotiating, right? It sounds more hardcore and serious and business related. But it's really just persuasion and influence in its truest form. That's all it is. So if selling is more transactional. It's about the thing. It's about me. It's the pitch. Then negotiating is far more tactical. It's about the agreement. It's about the details to help us both feel good about moving forward.
What you've said, from the world of negotiation, you've taken a bunch of things that says this has sales more effective. So you've got to move some stuff from the right hand of the slide to the left.
So the selling on that side as well, I will share with you. The selling is a very short. So if you have something to sell, which everybody does, as a plot twist, if you're sitting here today watching this, you are in sales. We all sell something, right? Whether it's an idea, whether it's a concept, whether it's a product or service. We all trade something, and the thing we're trading for might just be agreement. So what we're trying to do is when we're selling is we're trying to get an idea across the line to persuade and influence people. Now, interestingly, when we're selling, and we're all consumers too, right? We all buy stuff. So we can often be conscious when we're being sold to. So when someone's selling us an idea, we tend to clock it when the pitch comes. Our brain goes, oh yeah, here it comes. Here it is laid on me. Here's the pitch, right? So it's really a very small component of the conversation. Now, interestingly, when I'm selling my services to companies, my sales conversation goes for 1 hour, pretty much 1 hour. The selling component comes at about the 45th minute and it goes for 4 minutes. The rest of the time I'm negotiating. I'm setting up to have a good negotiation conversation when that time comes. That's all I'm doing. So this is probably a good time to transition now where I'll talk about where the manipulation comes into it. A couple of things. This is subjective. This is Julia Ewert's opinion only, but I have been doing this for long enough that part of this is around intent and how it feels, right? So when someone is being manipulated, manipulation is around trickery. It's around almost forcing someone to do things they ordinarily wouldn't agree to. So one example that I can give you is straight out of 1970. One adage that is when you're selling or talking to somebody, what you should be doing is nodding your head the whole time. And because the more they nod their head at you, the more they're actually trying to say yes and agree with you. That's just trickery. That's not genuine. So what we should be doing is recognizing that's a tactic or a trick. That stuff doesn't stick and it negatively impacts your relationship. So manipulation is less about the collaboration and the manipulation is more the one-sided. It's more about me trying to get you to do something that you probably ordinarily wouldn't agree to. Morally, it's not great, but it's also around the trickery and the intention of that. When there is an absence of manipulation, what you'll find is there's excellent collaboration. Both parties feel bought into the conversation, and that forms the basis for great decision-making because we've got the foundation right.
That's really cool distinction, because when we've talked about influence versus manipulation, we're looking a lot from the outcome. There might be a result called the same action gets taken, but then what about that afterwards? When I talk about decision making, I've talked about this challenge of buyer's remorse. I've made the purchase, and then the minute I get home and walk in my new home or drive my new car off, I'm like, what have I done? What a terrible mistake. And I look at that from a sort of cognitive bias point of view or a decision process. There's also something in there about a sales or a manipulation versus influence point of view.
Just because somebody has buyer's remorse, it doesn't mean they're being manipulated. There's a whole bunch of reasons we buy stuff that we have remorse on. And it does absolutely, there is no distinct connection between as an absolute saying that, oh, I bought something that I have remorse on, I was manipulated. No, we're all grown-ups. Sometimes we just make dumb choices. So that happens too, right? And that's okay. It doesn't mean we're being manipulated, right? This is your topic of genius, Paul, around decision-making. How did I get to make that decision on that thing? Was it that I was manipulated? No, I didn't weigh up all my options. I didn't do the right research. So there's a whole bunch of reasons why we have buyer's remorse. I feel I want to share some FBI hostage stories because that's really why everyone's here, right? So let me do that, and I'll make some links as to why you should care about this stuff, though, apart from it being cool stories.
And of course, that was how I influenced them to be interested in this conversation, was by dangling a carrot called FBI hostage negotiation.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a couple of stories, and then I'm going to share something with you called the trust equation. I've made a note on my piece of paper. If I forget to bring up the trust equation, can you remind me of that? Because this will tie in why everybody here needs to care about this stuff.
Yes.
So when the FBI called into a big event, there are two teams from the FBI that turn up. There is the FBI tactical team and there is the FBI negotiation team. Now, we've all watched some Hollywood movies, right? So in the tactical team, there's probably 50 of them, or it might be 100, or it might be 30. There's a lot of those people, and they're armed and dangerous. They're scary looking people, right? So when they turn up at this negotiation or this big dangerous event, the tactical team, what their role is, they are there for two reasons. They're there as a show of force, and as a show of, they are the consequence, right? So if the negotiators, they use this as a consequence. If you don't talk with us, that actually might be what happens, right? So there is some effect of having them there in person that helps the outcome. Now, there's a lot of people in this team, and all these people are recruited for specific characteristics. They are recruited for exceptional self-control, but I can tell you categorically, they're not wired for patience. When they turn up, they just want to get in, blow some stuff up and get the hell out of there, right? But they are obviously very highly trained professionals. This team turn up with weapons. They have guns, they have tanks, they have stun grenades, all sorts of stuff because it's a show of force, right? Now, if I talk now about the negotiation team that turn up. So if there's 50 of them, I'll get you to pause for a minute and just have a think about how many people you reckon are in this team, which is the negotiation team. Now, many people go, oh, there's just one, or there's two. No, there's like a whole team of these people. There could be 20 of them.
Wow.
Yeah. And so my question then is to, when I run this session live to groups, is, well, what the hell are they all doing? Why do they need so many? Because only one person gets to talk to the hostage taker. Only one person gets to talk. So the rest of them, what are they doing? What they're doing is they're collecting data, and they have one job of listening. So essentially, they resource them as listeners. So it'll be, your job is to listen for any sign of children in there. Your job, this next person, your job is to listen for how many people you reckon are in the building. Person C on the negotiation team, your job is to listen for what kind of weapons you reckon are in there. Person D on the negotiation team, your job is to listen for any time Paul is actively engaged with the hostage taker. What specifically are they talking about? Person E, your job is to listen for any time Paul is not engaged in conversation. What was the last thing he said? And so everyone gets a listening job to put all the pieces together, and maybe someone's resource to get coffee, who knows? So everyone gets a listening job. But interestingly, the tactical team are wired with weapons, right? They turn up with weapons. The negotiation team have also got some very powerful weapons, and there's two of them. They have, and it's very underwhelming. They have ears and they have a mouth, which I don't know your students, Paul, but I'm going to hazard a guess that everyone in this class is armed with the same weapons. Now, if you remember from before how effective they are, the negotiation team, do you remember the stat, Paul?
95%.
So how can they be so effective with the same weapons that we seem to have? This is what I find fascinating. Now, I know that they had the tactical team there as a show of force, but the idea is that they are using the same skills and techniques that in these dangerous scenarios that we can use to help reach agreement. I'll share another story. So there's a chapter in my book about this, actually. It's a funny story. So in the negotiation world, and all my negotiation friends are in the US, there's one uber famous negotiator who goes by the name of Jack Cambria. Anyway, when I found out that they knew Jack Cambria, this guy, my friend Andy, I said to him, oh my God, do you know Jack Cambria? He said, yeah, I know Jack. Now, what's interesting is how some people might gush over meeting a Kardashian. It was like, oh my God, Jack Cambria, Jack Cambria. So I said to Andy, oh my God, would you introduce me to Jack Cambria? This would be amazing to meet Jack Cambria. So anyway, long story short, Jack and I are now mates, so that's cool. So I'm friends with negotiation royalty, and anyone outside of this realm would never have heard of him, but anyone who's in negotiation would double take and think, holy moly, Jack Cambria, he's a big deal. Jack Cambria was essentially the godfather of the NYPD negotiation team, and he started that off. Now, when I first met Jack, he tells me this cool story that has actually become a chapter in my book with his permission. And he said to me in an email, because we were trying to find a time to catch up, we were exchanging emails to begin with. And he said to me in an email, Julia, when Annie introduced us, I did what any good cop should do, and I Googled you. And I figured out, Julia, we're in the same job. We're both salespeople. And he said, we will talk about this more when we catch up. So when we met, I said to him, Jack, I've been saying for years that everyone's in sales, but this seems like too much of a stretch, actually. Like, oh, you're not in sales? And he said, no, Julia, I'm in sales. And he said, the sooner I could get my team to recognize that they were salespeople, the faster the hostage negotiation would be over. I'm going to repeat that. He said, the sooner I could get my team to recognize that they were salespeople, the faster and the safer the negotiation ended.
Wow.
So what the question is, and then he riddled me a thing. He said, so let me riddle you, Julia. If I'm a salesperson as a hostage negotiator, what is the product I'm selling? And who is the buyer? Now, I class myself as someone pretty savvy, but I really struggled with this. I'll ask you, Paul, I know I'm putting you on the spot to in front of your own students. Can you follow the logic on that? What is the product that a hostage negotiator is selling and who is the customer?
It would appear the obvious customer is the hostage taker.
Correct. So that's the hostage taker. That's who they're selling to, right? That's the customer. So what is the product or service they are selling?
I'd say minimum jail time.
Yes, they're selling jail time. And when you play this back to the team or to the group, Paul, you should pause the video before you give the answer to get some good conversation going too. So hopefully Paul has just paused this. So yes, that's exactly right. So Jack says to me, Julia, we're selling jail time. The faster the hostage taker buys that service from us, the safer this ends and the faster it's over.
Wow.
We are getting them to willingly come out to accept jail time. If that doesn't show everyone here that everyone is in sales, then I don't know what other examples I could give you. I found that a fascinating scenario that we are all in sales. We're all trying to exchange some kinds of goods or services or ideas with someone else. We're all trying to negotiate, which is about reaching agreement.
So a bit of a Dixon, I suppose, but so hearing that story, would you say one of the critical things that we can do is identify who is the customer and what are we selling? And it sounds like it's, in that case, it's less obvious and therefore you're going to dig around for it. I guess in many cases, it looks like it's really obvious and it might not be really obvious. Is there something in there that's the thing we can go after, that by getting really clear on what we're selling and who is the customer, we've got his outcome was we get there quicker and safer?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different parts of this as well. And again, depending what you're selling, there might be many stakeholders. There could be a long time that the decision-making process goes for. So anyone in the room today that's doing deals that are worth probably at the bottom end, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, I can tell you from the clients that we work with that those that are doing deals worth hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, that takes some serious decision-making capability. That takes more than one stakeholder in the room. Stakeholders change. So that takes a lot of moving pieces to get that decision or that negotiation or that agreement. And that takes a huge amount of, that can take a huge amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's, and I'm saying it on the video because otherwise I know I'll forget on Sunday, but one of the things that I say from my side of the fence, the decision-making side of the fence, is that if you take your example with all the stakeholders over there on, let's say, the buying side, they're actually going through a decision, which is whether to buy or not. And of course, the job is having them engaged in the buying decision so that when the decision is let's buy, that all then happens.
Yep, absolutely. Now, one thing that underpins all this is this theory of trust. So I'll talk about that for a little bit. Now, there is a way you can measure trust. And if I get you all just for a moment to reflect in your own mind about someone you think about that you can trust. It can't be someone that lives in the same house as you or a family member. Think about someone that you trust implicitly. Now, hopefully it doesn't take that long to think of someone. But if I then asked you, you don't have to do it, but if I then asked you to quantify it, how do you know you can trust this person? Is it a feeling? Is there data? How do you know you trust someone? And the general themes come up around, I can depend on them. They haven't let me down. They have my best interests at heart. I know that we've got history together. All these sorts of things come up when we talk about how do we know we can trust someone. But there's a way we can measure trust. Cue the screen. Let me find that. Here we go. So there's a way we can actually measure trust. Trust is, oops, hang on, click, share. Did that work, Paul?
Yes, it's coming up.
Got that now? Yeah, got that?
Got it.
Okay. So trust is credibility plus reliability plus intimacy divided by self-orientation. Now let me explain what this means. Credibility is, do you have the experience, the qualifications, and the runs on the board? If you're an engineer, have you done the degree? It's the tick box stuff. The reliability is, can I depend on you? And what's your reputation like? Now, intimacy, some people giggle at this and go, oh, I know what that is. You don't. It's not what you think. So
Last week.
intimacy is just about connection that we have with people. It's likability. And then the
I call that
self-orientation. Sorry, Paul.
I
Go.
call that lack of distance. Like there's no distance between people.
Oh, yeah, I like that too. Yeah. And then the negative in this equation is self-orientation or self-interest. So in this equation, I could have all the tick box stuff in place. I'm dependable. We have things in common. I'm actually super credible, in fact. But if you get a sniff of feeling like I'm just in it for myself, then I am going to be less trustworthy. So the self-orientation can undo everything here. Now, what's really interesting on that top line, all those three attributes are really important in persuasion and influence, which is how we get trust. All those three attributes are important, but one of those carries more weight than the others. Now, before you answer, Paul, you may want to take a poll from the class.
Yeah, I'm going to go.
Right? If you had to vote, on which one of those carries the most weight in getting trust, would you choose credibility, reliability, or intimacy? You may want to get a vote from the group.
I'm going to do that.
Now, I will say that the winner is intimacy. Intimacy is simply likability. Like it's, do we have kids the same age? Do we work in the same industry? Are we both frustrated by resourcing challenges? Do we both have the same kind of dog? Are we watching the same Netflix series? I love a good Mexican drug cartel, Colombian drug cartel. I love a good drug cartel story, don't judge. Like Queen of the South, Ozark, Narcs, all that stuff, right? So if I'm talking to somebody and I realize that they're watching that show, oh man, we can talk for hours. And I just get some free kick in trust because it makes us feel connected to somebody when we find things in common. So they don't have to be big ticket things, but the intimacy is about finding things in common, which makes our likability go up. Now, interestingly, there is a spectrum of intimacy that the negotiators use. Down one end, we have connection, and up the other end is the FBI term. They call it bonding. Bonding is actually where Stockholm syndrome occurs. Paul, familiar with Stockholm syndrome? You familiar with that term?
Yes, yeah. Although, why not put it into some words just in case anyone in the room isn't?
Yeah, so Stockholm syndrome is where actually it's a documented thing where the person who's been held captive or been held hostage genuinely falls in love with the person that's holding them hostage. It's a documented thing and they go off and get married. It's a real thing. So that's Stockholm syndrome. So a good thing is we're not going for that in this equation. So on that spectrum of intimacy, connection down one end, bonding up the other, we're going for a short step up, which is just likability, which is what do we have in common?
And that's, sorry to interject, Julia, because I'm interested in exploring this a little bit, because my assertion and my experience is that there's a sort of an amount of authenticity in that, because of course, oh, Julia, you're like Narcs. Oh, I love Narcs. What a great show. What do you reckon to it? And I've never watched it. And I've got no idea about it, but I can create intimacy with you on the topic of Narcs. And I guess that's not actually intimacy. Back to that kind of the trick.
Yeah. The other thing as well is that people have got a pretty good BS meter these days. I'm going to work out pretty quickly, Paul, you've not seen it.
Yeah, and that's
then you will lose trust points with me because you've tried to trick me.
Yeah, and I think
people are pretty cluey on this stuff these days. They know if it's genuine or not.
That reminds me, and I'm saying it again to the video because I'll forget in the room. It reminds me of a conversation I had with Dave Snowden, who the students know. You might not know who he is, but anyway, at a conference I was at a couple of weeks ago, and he said one of the key skills that we need to keep evolving as we move into an AI-driven future is his term wasn't BS meter, but his term was the ability to tell the truth from the fake, because there's more fake getting out there, and so tuning our attention on the BS meter is going to give us a greater opportunity of freedom in the future. It's going to be a more important skill for us.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I'll add on this as well is with this intimacy being so powerful. Now, again, all those three attributes are important: credibility, reliability, intimacy, all important. Intimacy is the most important, and it can be used for good and evil very powerfully both ways. So let me show an example of both. Where it can be used for good is how startups get off the ground. They have no credibility. They haven't done anything. They have no dependability. They've not got any history. But some investor goes, oh, you're actually okay. I quite like you. There's $2 million. Go get an office, get a web development team, build out your technology. If that entrepreneur wasn't a very nice human, or they had nothing in common with them, or they couldn't relate to them, they're not getting investment. So intimacy is powerful. It helps us connect. It's great for building relationships because it shows that we're relatable to people. So that's how we use it. One way to use for good, which is in startups.
And just because I want to hear the dark side too. And we had International Star Wars Day last weekend. The interesting challenge is because we spent a lot of time talking about diversity and how bringing diverse stakeholders together improves decision outcomes, etc. And some of the things you're talking about, the diversity is the challenge to that, because you could say that the startup world's perfect. Why is it the number is like in the single digits % of venture capital goes to female founders versus male? Was because all the money sits with the men. And so, of course, it's much easier for someone who looks like me to have intimacy with a grey-haired venture capitalist who's got $20 million to punt my way than someone, frankly, who looks like you, right? I've got the deck stacked in my favor. So my path to intimacy is much shorter than yours. And I think that's a challenge as we look at the world of the whole point is diversity is what improves where we're trying to address. So just
I love that you brought that up. I think it's a really important point in business conversations today. Really important. The dark side of intimacy is it's also used for evil, also very successfully, not genuinely, but on the manipulation and trickery scale. This is how con artists operate. Like anytime you see someone that's been interviewed on a current affair that's been scammed, and they interview the people that have been scammed, and the journalist says, what did you think when you first met Paul? You know what they don't say is they never say, the reason we gave him $600,000, but you know what? We never liked him. We never liked him. They never say that. They're always shocked. And they always, the people that have been scammed, say things like, I can't believe Paul, great guy, Paul did this for us. Like to this, Paul and I went to school together. We played like cricket as kids. Like our kids, like, I cannot believe he did it. But Paul knows what he's doing, because so con artists, they use this, and that's that trickery and manipulation scale. They know what they're doing, but they are trying to connect and find things in common. I have someone else that I know that does a lot of negotiations with bikies. Bikies are renowned for trying to connect with police, right? And what they do is when a police officer pulls up a bikie, the bikie looks for a wedding ring on the police officer, because they want to connect, and then they'll make an assumption and go, oh, that police officer looks like they're about 45, 50, might have kids. I'm going to take a punt here. And the bikie will tell a story about, oh, I've had such a tough day. My kids are driving me mad. You know what? I'm just trying to do this for my kids. And they're trying to connect because they know it's so, they know it's so powerful. So again, used for evil. Now, why I need everyone in this class to care about this trust equation is two things. Is because, number one, people buy from people they like. And number two, people are more likely to agree with people they like. So people buy from people they like, and they're more likely to agree with people they like. That's the only reason I need you to care about this trust equation. You think about for a moment someone you don't like, or you have nothing in common with, or you despise. Man, we go out of our way to disagree with those people. They hardly have to say anything, in fact, and we already disagree. But when it's someone we do that we have connection with, we don't have to be best friends with them, we try harder. We try harder to agree. We find creative ways to make things work. But if I don't like you, it's a hard no, and I'm not coming back from that. So the intimacy matters when we're trying to persuade and influence and do better with our decision-making, because people buy from people they like, and they're more inclined to agree with people they like.
Fascinating. Very interesting, and interesting to hear. My money was going to be on intimacy being
Oh, of course it was.
key factor, but And frankly, because partly in what I do, I'm studying that kind of where is it making a difference. And I think the interesting challenge is a little bit like my other point, but is how you create intimacy, especially across a diversity divide. How do you do that? And I don't want to go on a hobby horse, but a minor hobby horse. One of my challenges in the certainly, let's say, relatively recent fight for gender equity has been, well, if women behaved a bit more like men, then they'd get more of the pie effectively. And for me, that concern called the way we cause intimacy is we got to modify our behavior in a way that isn't, let's say, isn't our self-expression. Sooner or later, it's going to blow up, right? There's either going to be upset or resentment or whatever eventually. So I'm just interested in the how we cause intimacy in ways that work across whatever the divide might look like. And also the secondary sort of challenge and the session we're having that you're in the middle of is also around contemporary leadership, is this: how do you lead people where you look across your team, you might go, I don't actually fancy going out for a beer with any of these people, or
you don't have to do any of that. I would like to talk on this topic for the next 5 hours though.
okay.
So this is, I could talk all day on this topic.
Yes.
Gosh, how do you create it? Let me go directly to that question. How do you create it? Well, you go first. So I would suggest in the company, sorry, the role that I play in my company, I do the sales. So I'm the person in my company who finds the clients and converts them. I'm going to say, out of all the people I've ever sold to, now I only sell to managing directors and CEOs. It's unusual that I would meet with someone who I would call a messenger, someone who's in between just collecting information. That would be less than 5% of instances. But most of the people I meet are managing directors or CEOs. I only talk to decision makers, which I know will resonate with you, Paul, given your topic. But what I can share is that out of all the years I've been doing this, I can count on one hand the amount of women that I've sold to.
Right.
Because the types of companies that I'm working with, they're run by men. So I have to find ways to connect. Now I will say, and can I ask, Paul, what's your gender balance in this program of students?
I don't know the exact answer, but by observation, I'd say pretty even, to be honest.
Okay. Why did I ask that? Oh, yes. So sorry, for the women in the room, I don't know if this resonates. I don't speak sport. So that is a career limiting move. In fact, I have learnt I don't speak sport. So what I have learnt to do is find other ways to connect. So when I'm networking, also the other thing is it's career limiting. I don't drink. So these are two massive limiting factors for a woman in business, in fact, when I'm trying to sell to men. So where I network with men, what I want to do, drink beer, talk about sport. So I am like, if there's ever someone who's up for a challenge, I'm like, I can totally do this. But I can also share that my conversion ratio is between about 77 and 83%. So I know I can do this. To your question, how do we do it? You go first. And what I mean by that is when you're having a conversation with someone, I'm always prepared in my conversation, and being prepared is the key. And being prepared is the opposite, everyone, of winging it. When you wing it, you don't win it. So be prepared. So I'm always prepared for a conversation to share something personal, but low stakes about myself.
So not the fact you're on your fifth husband or anything like that. That's not probably a good
nothing. And I have 27 kids. Like, I wouldn't be sharing that with people, not the case. But I'm always prepared to share something that's a safe topic that I'm taking a punt that people can relate to, and they'll step into the conversation. So as an example, I've just been to an event now, straight from coming to chat with you today, Paul, and I stepped into a story about how my Mother's Day wasn't ideal, actually. Controversial topic. Speaking quietly because my husband's in the next room. So this made for great conversation, right? Fairly safe. I didn't throw him under the bus. I just shared a few things about what kind of mumming is hard. So I just shared some things. So I'm always prepared to share something of myself first that's low stakes, that's safe. It might be something like I do a bit of exercise. So I might have a conversation. People say, how's your week going? Oh, it's pretty good, actually. So I'm never prepared to go, I'm having a really good week. How about you? I'm always prepared to say, I'm having a great week. It's Tuesday today, Paul, and I've already done 3 exercise sessions this week. I'm killing it. What are people likely to ask me now? Oh, what have you done? So again, this is safe conversation. So I'm always prepared to share something about like my kids or my family or my hobbies. I've got some cool hobbies. Like I went to a networking event recently. I even posted on this about LinkedIn, on LinkedIn. And I didn't know anyone this event. That makes me feel very uncomfortable. I'm wildly uncomfortable going to events where I don't know anybody. And I saw one person I knew after I got there, and they said to me, "Do you know anyone?" And I said, "No, I don't actually." I said, "I just know you." And they said, "Don't worry, you can chat to me the whole time." And I said, "Do you know what? Actually, respectfully, I'm going to challenge myself and I'm going to try and meet some new people today." And they were, "Good for you." So I went and broke my way into a group of men. And I said, "May I join the conversation if that's okay?" And they could tell I was on my own, and they welcomed me in and everyone introduced themselves. And I said, there's only three of us standing around, but I said, rather than play the "so what do you do" question, I said, "Can I try something different? What are your hobbies outside of work?" That brought 90 minutes of conversation with those people.
I love it. That's
So there are informal, safe things that we can do to build this intimacy. So I've now got 2 or 3 new mates, essentially. If I saw them again at an event, we would carry on with the continual jokes that we made, and we were having banter and hanging some crap on each other. So that built up pretty quick. So there are so the short line here is, how do you do it? You go first. You share something of yourself that's a safe, informal topic that allows people to step in and relate to you. And if that didn't work, find something else and try again.
awesome. Oh, I love that. Thank you. That's perfect for this conversation. So it leads me to another question. So I love the trust equation, and hopefully you can send me those couple of slides because the students will love to have them. So somewhere along your journey, you decided that the trust equation was fundamental to the success of selling. So you made the connection, trust and selling, which of course we've seen plenty of examples where that's not the case at all. So what had you come to that conclusion?
Probably how I started my company years ago, when I realized I was working in a pretty competitive space. I was a sales trainer back then, so I was just doing workshops, whereas now I teach process. So I do one thing now. It's a 12-month engagement with our clients rather than a 2-hour workshop. I was competing in a space selling time for money. I realized also I was competing against traditional sales trainers who were white middle-aged men. They were the stereotypical type as well, the Maserati driving, Rolex wearing, gel hair slicking type people. And they were teaching tips, tricks, and tactics. And I just thought there has to be a better way here, because the way these people are teaching sales, I just thought there had to be a better way. That was also around the same time I started to throw myself into becoming a student of negotiating, where I also, like you, everyone here, I love the hostage stories. Yes, they're horrible, but they're gripping, right? You're on your edge of the seat when you hear those hostage stories. So that did get me interested. And then I became fascinated by words. The negotiators are just simply using words. How do they use words to get someone who is threatening to do something so awful to people to get them to buy jail time? So I became a student of working out, how do they do that? Because I want to be able to do that. I want my kids to be beautifully mannered and well behaved, and I don't have to shout at them. Surely some of this stuff is relevant. Yes, it is. I want to have a great relationship with my husband so that we don't fight. So we do that too. And even on a side point, Paul, one of the things that people say to me, it's a sarcastic thing that people throw at me. They say, "Oh, Julia, I bet your husband hates being married to a negotiator." And I then throw back in deadpan face and say, "No, he loves it."
Yeah,
And then
I was the opposite.
they laugh because they think they know why. They laugh because they think it's because I strong arm him or I have all the leverage. But I say, no, he loves it because it means that we don't fight. It means that we avoid conflict. Because when you can use these principles the right way, you don't have to trick people or get angry. It doesn't mean that we don't have difficult conversations, but what it means is we avoid the conflict. So who really wants to fight with their partner? Anybody? So when we can use this stuff right, we get to have great, respectful conversations. We get to have conversations that dig deep to really understand what's troubling somebody or what the roadblocks are. And again, those are the principles in persuasion and influence in decision-making so that we can reach agreement.
I love that. Thank you. I'm mindful of your time, and we are nearly at time on our call, but we had a couple of questions come in from the students. I'd love to ask them.
Yes.
So you have the chance to respond. One question is, how important is it to balance emotional attachment and rational judgment. So this sort of head and heart thing of the desired outcomes when choosing your sales approach or your sales strategy.
Oh, okay. There is a very famous negotiator by the name of Chris Voss. He wrote a very famous book called Never Split the Difference. It's a very good negotiation book. And he talks about that emotions aren't the obstacle, emotions are the means.
Mm.
There's an old school adage that says things like check your emotion at the door or leave your emotions don't belong. Emotions are the means, people. That's the reason we get out of bed. Emotions are the reason we like a particular brand of toothpaste. Emotions are the reason we like some foods, but we don't, or we like some exercise but not others. It's how it makes us feel. So the faster you can have some connection on the emotion of why someone is trying to make a decision, the faster we agree.
Great. Yeah. And I'm totally with that. And we've had a lot of conversation around the emotional dimension.
Yeah, it belongs. 100% it belongs.
And I think the mistake is to try and check it at the door and go, let's ignore that or pretend that doesn't matter.
That's not helpful. That's very not helpful.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Some quite specific questions, but I'm sure you'll have some useful answers. One is, and I'm going to rephrase it because I can see that the heart of the question here, which is so the referral sale. So there's something that's about influencing someone else. In other words, maybe I'm guessing myself, the product you're now selling is the referral. You're not selling the product. So what's your thought on what it takes to cause effective referrals and that influencing someone who's at arm's length from you effectively?
Okay, I have an answer for this, but I don't know if it's the right thing that this student is looking for. But whoever asks this question, if it's not right, ping me on LinkedIn, ask me the question if I've got that wrong, and I'll provide you an answer. I'm going to take this as, how do you make a successful referral?
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's
yeah, so the very short answer is what you should never do is try and sell someone else's services. So if I wanted to introduce Paul to someone in my network, the worst thing I can do is say to my mate, Pete, hey, Pete, you should totally meet Paul. He's a great mate of mine. He's got a great company called Catalyze. This is what they do. They help companies to systemize decision-making. You should totally work with Paul. I can't sell Paul services. The best thing I can do for Paul, if I want Paul and Pete to work together, is I would do an email introduction. And I have a template that I use for this because I introduce lots of people. And in that email, it's along the lines of, hey, Paul, hey, Pete, nice to introduce you to the two of you. I've spoken with each of you about this introduction. Paul, this is how I know Pete. This is something cool and interesting that I have in common with Pete. So I share something intimate. And then I'll say, hey, here's something I like about Paul. Here's what he does. Paul and I are in a business group together. This is how we know each other. This is what I like about Paul. Here is each other's phone numbers. I will leave you both to connect from here.
Cool. Like that. So you've started the spark of intimacy between us by giving.
Yeah, so you can go, oh, I know that business group, or you can go, oh, Pete, you cycle with Julia. I like cycling. So I'm trying to give you both a free kick in terms of building some of that connection.
Cool. The next question, can you share some common mistakes firms make when trying to increase their conversion rates?
Paul, how long have we got for that? I've written articles on this on LinkedIn. Okay, so the shortest ones I would have, and I'm not going to give any explanation. I'm just going to give the bullet points here. Mistakes they make is they don't follow a process. They don't teach their people how to do sales. They're going after the wrong clients. They can't handle price negotiations. They don't know how to play the long game. They're trying to transact and not build partnerships. They have no intimacy. In fact, I'm putting to my second screen. You can also that. So they have no intimacy or connection. They do what I call the show up and throw up. The show up and throw up is when you go into your appointment and you start vomiting your greatness all over the prospect. That doesn't win business. Gosh, what else loses? Making it up as you go, winging it. That's a losing approach. Yeah, I could talk all day on the whole reason I have a successful business is because these problems exist.
Yeah, so. and one of the things I can hear as a common thread in there is the very short-termism, it's a now thing. And a lot of what you're talking about, if you look at the trust equation, that takes some time, and that's the nature of it.
Can I just throw up just on that? Because can I just give a visual for that too?
Of course.
And I will also email you this visual. But the reason I'm going to show you this, you've seen this before, Paul. This is the process that I teach And this addresses every single one of the things that companies do wrong when it comes to sales. So I'll send that to you across, Paul, with the other couple of slides you've asked for. But this is why I teach process now, because it plugs all the holes that I've just bullet pointed to you all.
Magic. I might actually have some printing copies in the room if that's all right with you.
Yeah, I will email it to you. But that's all the things that you need to do. So this is the opposite to that question. If the question was just ask what are all the things that people do to get wrong, those are the things.
Yeah.
If the question now is what does everyone have to do to get this right, you just need to follow that slide. Do all those things. Yeah, I'll make sure Paul gets a copy to everyone.
Yeah, and I know one of the questions I've just seen, and we'll finish here, but one of the questions I've just seen is around how do you follow up without seeming pushy? I know that's a fundamental part of the way.
Yeah, that is
you have the conversation and nurture the conversation and move it forward is an essential part of.
The answer to that question to do it is actually a 4-hour module in my program around how to follow up. And I don't say that to say that, I guess I share that because there's no quick answer for that.
Yes.
There is a methodology around how to do follow-up properly. And if you in the room are like me, where no one ever buys from me the first time they meet me, no one really, I reckon I've had a couple of people that have bought the second time they met me. I'm playing long game with everybody. So everyone gets followed up in a purposeful way that's not annoying. But yeah, there's a methodology around doing that. I may as well, because I've got the audience here, Paul. If anyone in your class here sees an opportunity for this in your business, please contact me. I'd love an opportunity to have an informal conversation with you about how I can help.
Thank you, Julia, and that's it's very valuable to the group. And I think there's lots of things that we'll have conversations about this conversation once the video is complete. But I think something that the long game is I hear is really important, and the focus on relationships and trust.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing I want to highlight, thank you, Julia, specifically, the trust equation, I think, brings together a lot of what we've been talking about over the last 4 days.
Nice.
It's something that you can really point at and go, oh yeah, what does it take to build credibility? Well, we've talked about that as a way of providing influence. What does it take to build intimacy, etc. And I didn't know this, the group might think it was a setup, but I didn't know you were going to put the word intimacy on a slide either, because we had that conversation about intimacy last week as how you bring to get the connect. I like your spectrum of kind of connection all the way through to bonding, and where does it sit in the middle, and Stockholm syndrome at one end of it. Really lots of topics to resonate. Julia, thank you so much for being with us today, and I really appreciate the time you've taken to share this amazing wisdom and insight. I do encourage everyone in the room, do reach out and connect with Julia, because I know personally Julia responds well, and she has some really cool training resources on LinkedIn as well, which in fact my entire team have all done. And so they're all thrilled that you're part of this course right now. So thanks, Julia.
You.
Enjoy the rest of your night, and we're going to jump into some conversation.